Welcome to Flyover Frequencies, where Midwest skies meet the people who keep aviation moving. From hangars to flight decks, classrooms to control towers, and amateurs to pros, we share stories, experiences, and practical insights from the heart of Midwest aviation. Last episode, we spoke with Russ Bird, who told us about his multi-decade career flying corporate, then airlines, and now contract piloting, along with some Embraer aircraft delivery. We heard from Russ what a career can be like. Now we're switching it up and talking to someone who is starting out on the cusp of their career progression, ready to fly jets. In the days of iPads, autopilots, and moving maps, it's rare to find a young pilot who learned to fly the way most of us mid-career aviators did. With a manual E6B flight computer, a paper sectional, and no GPS or autopilot to lean on. Today on Flyover Frequencies, we're talking with a capable young man who represents the next generation of Midwest aviators, Grant VandeVoorde. Grant's a fourth-generation pilot, current flight instructor, and passionate tailwheel flyer with his sights set on a career in corporate aviation. His first flight instructor was his dad, who taught him to fly in a Citabria, and then he went on to earn his other pilot certificates and ratings through the University of Dubuque's aviation program in Northeast Iowa. While most people his age are still figuring out life, Grant's been teaching others how to fly and has some unique flying experiences, most recently from Southern California to Alaska and back in a small twin-engine airplane. We'll hear how that hands-on old-school start shaped the pilot he's become and how others can earn their pilot certificate. Grant, welcome to Flyover Frequencies.
Thanks for having me on.
Welcome. So recently, Jonathan and I accomplished a couple of tailwheel refreshers with Grant, and that's kind of how we met and got started in our relationship. And we wanted to talk to Grant about a couple of different things. And you showed us both a pretty interesting technique that we had never seen before, and that's kind of stuck with me about drawing shapes in the sky for rudder and stick and rudder coordination, and a little bit of uncoordination too, but just maintaining that control, going to crabs. And that was something I'd never seen in all my years of flight instruction in my past and all the lessons that I've taken. And I really took that to heart. And I think that shows no matter how young or old or experienced or inexperienced you are, there's always something to learn in aviation. That was a really good lesson.
Yeah. Did you do Dutch rolls before we had flown?
I had done them quite a bit in the past, but I hadn't practiced them in forever. So yeah. I was definitely out of practice on.
I fly with a lot of people who have never done Dutch rolls before, and I think that's also a really good coordination technique.
Yeah, I definitely felt like I improved over the few hours that we were together, but I think I still have a long way to go to get back to my cross coordination and keeping it all nice and smooth.
I still do a little bit of flight instructing on the side, and I fly with a lot of people, and there's just not enough crosswind when you're coming into land to really teach a crosswind landing.
Yeah,
because I teach out of Des Moines, and we have 2 runways. So I've taken what you taught me in Ehren of drawing those shapes in the sky. I've incorporated it into what I teach my students now.
Yeah,
just a little bit of cross coordination, so they can kind of get used to it. So when the wind is blowing and they do have to land on crosswind, they have some kind of skills to do it. So thanks for teaching that. That was really cool.
There's either too much crosswind or not enough to practice. There's never the right amount of crosswind. So, the alternate is do the shapes in the sky and get that little bit of uncoordination because you're landing in the side slope. And a lot of people, they come in and it's just not second nature. So they lack the feeling of being uncoordinated, which is really the proper procedure, and they end up landing with side loads.
Well, just for a little bit of reference too, Grant had us draw triangles, squares, and circles were the most advanced, where it's a constant arc in all directions.
Yeah, and Andrew hasn't flown with Grant yet. It's on his list of things to do, but he's not joining us today, so it's just myself and Ehren. But Grant, you're a 4th-generation pilot. What's your earliest aviation memory, and when did you realize you wanted to carry the legacy of being a pilot forward?
My dad has always had an airplane when I was growing up. So my dad's a pilot, and I vividly remember, I was probably 6 or 7. But we had a 195 at the time, a Cessna 195 tail dragger. We took the 195 up to Oshkosh that year, the air show, the big event of the year. And I don't know if you're familiar with the 195 section, but they put them right on the front lines because it's a beautiful vintage tail dragger. And so I remember we had a good parking spot. We were basically right on the show line. I just remember, I think that would have been one of my first air shows, and I was in awe of the aerobatics and the military aspect of it, and the amount of people is pretty eye-opening too.
Yeah, it's quite a community too, isn't it?
Yeah. And I suggest if you haven't gone to Oshkosh that you do, even if you're not in aviation. There's always something you can find interest in.
Yeah, air shows are cool no matter who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the
So
fact that it's a fly-in air show too, so that everybody flies in, and then there's an air show, and there's all the exhibits and all the tents and all the vendors,
right.
and people are camping there because it's days long.
Yeah. And then of course there's pictures of me around the airplane when I was little that I don't remember those times, but the first memorable was that Oshkosh trip. And of course we pitched a tent under the wing because at Oshkosh you can either, in this day and age, a lot of people get Airbnbs or a hotel, but the tradition is you camp under the wing. You camp next to your airplane. So I remember pitching the tent up under the wing and camping next to the airplane, then waking up the next morning to, the sound of 5, 6 airplanes flying formation. That was kind of
Yeah,
that was the alarm, right?
yeah.
We've heard several people who have went to air shows, and that was their memory. That's how they kind of the seed was planted in them. Hey, I want to fly.
And for anyone who doesn't know, we're talking about Oshkosh, Wisconsin. It's the Experimental Aircraft Association, EAA Air Venture. Check it out.
So you were 7 or 8 when you remember going into Oshkosh. How old are you now?
22,
22. Man,
just turned.
you got your stuff together early.
You're trying to. I wouldn't go that far.
Well, 22 years old, you got the flight time and the experience, and you're ready to make that leap into flying jets already. I think I was still
Yeah.
in school and trying to figure things out.
Yeah.
So you did some flying with your dad. Jonathan mentioned that he was your first flight instructor. You've grown up around aviation and surrounded by pilots. Was there ever like a pressure to fly, or did the passion just come naturally for you?
When I started flight training with my dad, he reminded me multiple times. He said, "I don't want you to feel any pressure. I don't want you to feel like you have to, get your pilot's license and go into aviation as a career. So, I want you to do what you love at the end of the day. Coincidentally, this is what I love." So I got my pilot's license when I was in high school, decided to keep the momentum going and go to University of Dubuque Aviation College. And I think that is what sprouted the passion, not so much the program, but the people I met, the opportunities that I experienced. That's where the passion started growing. Because, I was in high school. I was like, oh, getting a pilot's license would be cool. I considered it as a career, but I was in high school, so I wasn't thinking too far ahead. I didn't even know what I was doing the next day. So I'd say the passion started when I started meeting people and seeing the opportunities come about.
When I was in high school, I think my graduating class, there was like 380, 390, and 3 of us went on to be pilots. So
Wow.
it's just not,
Yeah.
it's hard to find a group in high school
Yeah.
with similar interests. You could talk about aviation because, most people just don't do it.
Right.
So I can
Right.
understand your perspective. Yeah, I went to University of Dubuque, and then you meet hundreds of people
Right.
Yeah.
who are in the
Exactly.
aviation program and passionate about it. Yeah, I can see how that really flourished. So your dad was a corporate pilot, and he taught you how to fly. Now, you kind of learned in a really inspiring way, actually, a way that I hope to teach my sons how to fly. You learned in a Citabria, which is a high wing, entry level aerobatic aircraft where there's one pilot in the front and there's one pilot in the back. And you didn't have a lot of technology. What was your dad's rationale for making you use a paper sectional when iPads were prevalent and making you use a manual flight computer versus a digital one?
So my dad's really old school. He was a corporate pilot. He was on the Falcon, so he's used to having 5 big screens in front of him. But his rationale was when you're starting to fly, that's when you're learning how to fly. That's why I flew with Citabria for the private, because with tailwheel airplanes, they really teach you how to fly. The Citabria, the Cub, a lot of old tail draggers, the flight controls aren't linked. So you really have to get that, what we call stick and rudder. And then the process of planning a cross country, finding out, learning about the airplane, there was no easy way about it. So it taught me and laid the foundation so that later I could build on it.
That makes a lot of sense. And really, if you know how to do things at a very basic level, using the technology and understanding when the technology is giving you accurate information and when it's not,
Right.
you'll be able to discern that because you were taught in the basics. So this is a pretty small flight deck aircraft. You would have had to been pretty organized when you're doing your cross countries.
Yes, I had to learn organization. So, I'd have stuff falling on the floor, and, I'd be like digging for it, and the airplane would start losing altitude. I'm like, oh gosh. So it was definitely taught me how to be organized, whether putting the sectional up on the dash and pulling it out when, you know, at a non-critical phase of the flight. But at the end of the day, it was paper. It wasn't like something like an iPad. So if it did fall, it wasn't a big issue. It was just like, oh, I'll get it later.
How old were you when you started training? You said you were in high school, but how old?
I think I just turned, I think I was 18. I was going into senior year, and I'll never forget it because I had to miss the first day of school because I had my check ride that day. So, everybody's starting class, and I'm sitting in a briefing room getting quizzed about what's this, what's that. Tell me about true airspeed, where everybody else is learning about the syllabus. It's like
So
non-traditional.
I'm just curious because I didn't start flight training until I was 20 and I was out of
Yeah.
high school. When you were taking like physics class or math, like trigonometry, did you find those subjects more applicable because you could apply them to flying?
No,
No.
no. I actually dropped high school physics because it was too hard. And then I got a C in math. Yeah, absolutely not.
I was just curious, because there's a lot of angles and stuff. I mean, we use rule of thumbs for when we're going to descend and things like that. But that if you go back and actually do the math, it's trigonometry,
Yeah,
calculating your crosswind and things there's a trigonometry equation for it.
That's one of the common questions that you get from people that are not as involved in aviation is, don't you have to have perfect eyesight?
yeah,
Don't you have to be really good at math? But
yeah,
you don't have to be a mathematician or a physics major to understand the math that we use in aviation. Can you see that angle that you need to be at and realize
right.
the hand-eye coordination to accomplish that goal? It's more like throwing a baseball than it is solving a math equation.
Yeah,
I need to get this ball from A to B. How do I do that?
yeah.
Grant, how does your flying experience compare to what your dad or your grandfather has told you or you've heard about your grandfather's experience? What's different with your generation versus theirs, if anything?
I would say so. My dad always tells me stories when he was my age. All the charters were done in light twins, light multi-engine, Barons, Travel Airs, twin Cessnas. King Airs were popular back then. And now it seems the popular choice of airplane for travel is a jet. So you have a gap now. So from flight instructor to the next level, so the insurance is higher. So it's a little harder to get to that next level. You almost have to know what the path is you want to take if you want to go airlines or corporate. Because if you want to go airlines, the one thing I learned is that it's best to they have these pathway programs that help you get started with an airline sooner. You get paired with a mentor, and I'm not sure, some airlines you can start building seniority when you join those pathway programs. So the earlier you get started on with an airline, the better. But for someone like me who wants to get into corporate aviation, there's no pathway programs. It's all about who you know and the connections. And it's a little bit harder because, like I said previously, it's very common to come across all the departments having jets, which require higher insurance time or possibly some time in the type of airplane or jet time. So now you're left with wondering, how do I get that if nobody will insure me? And that's kind of where I'm at right now is trying to find that bridge to jump the gap, get the experience that's required or preferred. How do I get that experience?
Yeah, you're right. I think just hearing the generations that came before us, I mean, Aaron, I know you flew some light twins in charter, but it just, and then when we spoke with Russ last episode, I mean, he talked about how many different flying services were on the same field back in the 60s and 70s. And it's just not, you're right, Grant. There is a gap right now. There's not the light twins that a flight instructor can progress into and then eventually move into a turboprop or a jet from there. You got to make that leap from a Skyhawk to a jet. And you got
Right.
to find someone who's willing to insure you and give you the chance to do it if you want to stay corporate.
Yeah. And I know you guys, I know I've talked to you guys about, advice and kind of where to go from here. And I know you guys have thrown the idea of get hired on with a regional, build some jet time, get some, Part 121 time, stay at that regional for 1 to 2 years, and now you're eligible and qualified and you're able to apply to these corporate positions. But like I said before, those regionals are scooping people up in their pathway programs. So if I'm just an off the street guy, I don't have the what do you call it?
Experience in the hours that they're looking for
Yeah,
and time and
yeah,
type. Yeah.
exactly.
Another thing too, and looking for a single engine turbine, like a Pilatus job or another single turboprop, those are probably good pathways as well. I was really fortunate, kind of like Jonathan was saying. I was flight instructing for a company that then needed, some twin piston charter pilots, so they helped me get through my multi-engine commercial, and then I did that for a couple of months, and then they said, "Well, we need an SIC checkout in the
Right.
citation." So I got an SIC checkout, and then that was when I was 21, 22 years old. Wasn't old
Yeah.
enough even for my ATP yet, but then when I got old enough for my ATP, they helped me get my ATP and my PIC type rating in a citation, and that progression was there all at that same company.
Right.
And I understand what you're saying, that it's not there anymore necessarily, where you have an operator that can take you from single engine piston flight instructor through a multi-engine piston charter pilot through now a jet PIC.
Yeah.
But I think there are still those pathways out there, and you might have to be willing to go to Alabama or Florida or
Right.
Alaska and find that single engine turboprop operator, or that hopefully a multi-engine turboprop operator. That
Yeah.
could be a different pathway than the regionals. Although I think the regionals are a good spot with the advice that you just mentioned a few minutes ago. Getting that structure of a 121 environment, I think, will take you a long way in your career. Even if you want to come back to corporate, just having that training in the structure of a airline environment I really appreciate it. I guess what
Right.
I had, what my experience. So
Yeah, Aaron's exactly right. If you go, it doesn't even have to be in an airline. It could be a national fractional or a very well-known charter company that has been doing it for a while, and they do things right. That initial training, that initial professional training that you're going to get, will carry
Right.
you through your career, and
Yeah.
it'll help you say no, which you're going to have to say no several times in your career, and it's going to be tense sometimes.
Right.
But you're going to have to know what's right and what's wrong. And I'm not saying you don't know that already. But when you get into like flying jets and you get into different sets of regulations and environments, especially for the first time, you got to learn at some point.
Right.
And then, because I went to a well-known fractional operator, and the training I got there carried me through my career as well. So Grant, um, trying to make that jump, like you said, from flight instructor to a corporate operator, we said the light twin market's really not there. Ehren did say that the single engine turboprop market still is, and that's definitely true. And
Mhm.
that's where connections really help in corporate aviation. And
Right.
no matter where you're at, you can go to like a local business aviation group. They're usually formed somewhere. And if you get in there and you talk to people, they get to know you. there's opportunities throughout
Yeah.
the country, even in small towns, where you can find somebody. But again, you have to find the connection to be able to do that. It's not as straightforward as the airlines.
Right.
The TBMs and PC-12s are pretty sweet. I
Yeah.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
Pilatus and
Those are
yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, I think there was a TBM in a hangar when I was flight instructing, and I thought that thing looked so tough. It has a
Yeah.
nice stance, a nice ramp presence.
Yeah. I prefer the Pilatus. I do.
Yeah, they go slower so you can get more flight time. I get that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I guess that kind of takes us to a question that we had up from your dad. Have you any lessons learned from your dad or your grandfather's advice that stuck with you, I guess, both career wise or, just aviation wise at all?
My dad, he always reminds me that the industry is very cyclical. Did I say that right? Cyclical? It's weird to say. But for every up, there's a down, and for every down, there's an up. And that stuck with me. So it's not always going to be like this, is what he reminds me. 10 years from now, I'm going to be wishing I was a 22-year-old flight instructor, right? Even though right now I'm wishing, I can't wait till I'm in the jets and I'm in the flight levels. But he reminds me to take the present for what it is, enjoy where I'm at, what I'm doing, because I am doing it for a reason. So that resonates pretty well with me, to kind of just slow down, enjoy the process, enjoy going slow, enjoy flying low. And he always tells me my time's coming. So I just have to believe him for what it is and keep going.
That's pretty sage advice, no matter who you are and what you do.
Yeah.
Live in the present.
It is a very cyclical industry, and timing is everything. You can do everything right, and the timing might not be there. But, we were talking with Russ Bird on our last episode, and that was some of his advice too. And you got to stick with it. You got to keep going after it, keep getting your flight time and building toward what it is that you want. What's your goal, But I think coming back to part of what your dad said too is you can't be looking so far ahead that you're not living now. And you can't be living so much now that you're not looking ahead. You got to find that balance too.
So Grant, you started doing your training under a set of federal aviation regulations, Part 61, which are kind of the basic flight training regulations. And then you went to University of Dubuque, which is a Part 141 school. So you can get done with your flight training at somewhat of an accelerated fashion. What were the differences you noticed between flight training under Part 61 and 141?
If you like structure, Part 141 or a university flight school, that's for you. Part 61, it's very discretion oriented, meaning you look to the instructor for guidance, and the instructor, they basically make your own schedule. And that's what I teach in right now, is Part 61. And I find it to be, I prefer it. I like having the discretion. If you're organized and you can keep a good schedule, like for my students, I print out the monthly calendar, and I say, this is what we're doing this day, this day, this day at this time. So I make it structured in a way so they know what their progress is. They know how they're moving. And of course, it's weather dependent, airplane dependent. So I still structure it in some way where it's not just a free for all, but the university, they have, minimum flight times you need to go for a stage check. So they have what they call stage checks, that are basically checkups on how your progress is doing. And so it's a very structured program. A lot of people call it a pilot factory. So it's a bunch of students learning the same procedure, the same technique. Whereas Part 61, you learn the correct procedure, but you develop your own technique along the way. And I think technique is very important. Part 61 allows you to build on that technique, whereas 141, they see you straying away from the herd, and they put you right back in line. They don't
get the lariat out. Yeah.
Right. They don't really like the technique there.
So Part 61 is a little bit more customizable to the flight student and maybe their goals, and flexible.
Right.
And Part 141 is a little bit more rigid. They kind of have to be. They're regulated
Right.
more closely by the FAA. And I think their primary goal is to train professional pilots.
Right.
And the major source well, the major employers for where professional pilots go are the airlines, so which are very structured. So I can see the reason.
You need to streamline for efficiency too. I mean, with that number of students that are there, you have to have it the set parameters, the set expectations, the set stage checks and progress checks to make sure that everyone is staying on track, and they are trying to help you graduate as well. Most of those are associated with a degree program. So you need to be staying on track with a class schedule as well. So I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
that's a huge part of them wanting to make sure that you are progressing through each stage at a given point, and that way you get the class credit for that flight lab and
Right.
credit towards your degree as well.
In a lot of those 141 university programs, they have what I had earlier mentioned, the pathway. So the school I went to, University of Dubuque, they had a partnership with Envoy, Endeavor, bunch of these regionals. And so basically you sign up, you're a cadet, you go through the program, the regional tracks your progress as you progress through your ratings and hours. And once you're, at 900 hours, you can flow basically into that regional and you get what they call a CJO, conditional job offer, versus that where you have to build up to 1500 hours. And then there's no flow to that. You're an off the street applicant.
Yeah.
So if you want to go airlines and you know that from the start, I would say the fastest, most efficient way is through Part 141.
What were some of the classes that you were taking while you were in college that were aviation specific?
So there was aviation meteorology, human factors. They had ground school classes for all of the ratings. So I did a instrument ground, commercial ground, multi-engine ground, CFI ground. The ones I really liked were, so they have a CRJ sim, like a full mock-up of the cockpit, and what they called it was CRM, crew resource management. So you're in the class, you get paired up with another individual, another student in the class, and you guys are a crew. And because these 141 programs are very airline oriented, they teach you how to work as a crew, how to be in a crew environment, basically prepare you for that next level opportunity. And I really enjoyed that class because you get paired up and you work with your partner and you transition to the simulator, and it's a full mock-up. So one guy's is labeled the captain, one guy's labeled the first officer, and you learn the flows of the CRJ, you learn the systems, and you do these LOFs, these line-oriented flight training sessions, and you get a grade on how well you mesh with, as a crew with the other guy. And that was cool. That was really cool.
So one of the things I liked when I was going through college for aviation was you learned about theory, but a lot of what you learned was immediately applicable to what you were doing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Where did you go?
I went to Central Missouri State. Well, they call it the University of Central
Right.
Missouri now, but
Okay.
Central Missouri State University when I was there.
Yeah.
So that's like 45 minutes southeast of Kansas City near Whiteman Air Force Base.
Okay.
They
Yeah.
keep the beat.
Yeah, where
Yeah.
they keep the B2s. But if you're somebody who likes to learn something that is immediately applicable, aviation is definitely a field you should look into.
Yeah.
Grant, who are some of the students that you're training now? Who's calling you up asking to get their private pilot certificate or any other advanced ratings?
So we have a fair share of younger guys. A good amount of my students are local high schoolers from Pella. So it's fun to work with them, obviously, for private. A lot of them are, 16 and they're just waiting to turn 17 to get their private license. A couple of local folks who have had a license in the past and got out of currency and want to get current again and fly again. Good share of those. We do what's called a recertification program. So that's probably our one of our busiest sides in Pella.
You're talking about the HIMSS recertification program,
Yeah,
the
the
Human
hymns.
Intervention Motivational Study.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So what is that recertification program? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
yeah, so um, we get individuals who have gone through the HIMSS program, meaning that it's a professional pilot at a major airline or regional airline. They make a mistake. They test positive on a DOT test. So the FAA revokes their certificates, but they don't revoke the flight time. So they still have all these hours, but they just revoke their certificates. So these individuals, they go through the HIMSS program, their side, their side of what they call therapy or counseling, and then they get their medical back and they come to us. And what we do is we do an accelerated training. We get them their private instrument, commercial multi or ATP, in usually a span of 2 weeks because they keep their hours. So they're eligible for the check rides and they take their check rides with us. They get their certificates back and they go back to their respective airline and we get them back up in the air. So,
Wow, 2 weeks. That's pretty condensed to do all of those check rides again. And especially if you haven't
yeah,
flown a small plane in quite some time, you've been flying
exactly.
something larger there's an adjustment there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's that like flying with people who have thousands of flight hours and all this experience? And then now you're their instructor and you've got some experience,
Right.
but they just happen to have more.
Right. It was intimidating at first when I first started as an instructor and fast forward 9, 10 months, it feels normal. They feel just like another student. Um, and you find a cadence or a pace that works well because it's accelerated, right? So they come pretty well prepared. They know their stuff. So a lot of what we're doing is just check ride review. So going through the certification standards, making sure they're good for the check ride, they're qualified. So it's fairly easy. And the intimidation factor is gone. And then on the personal side of it, these are connections I'm building for life. So, these are professional airline captains, first officers, and they always leave with telling me, hey, if you need a reference at, this airline or this company, feel free to, you've got my number, shoot me a text, give me a call. So both professional and personal aspect of it, I love it. These guys are great. I feel like I'm giving back and helping them out, get back to work.
That's great. Yeah, so that's a really cool aspect of what you and your company does there in Pella. Only a handful of those recertification programs throughout the country,
Right.
and one right here in central Iowa. So on the other side of it, though, you kind of talked about some of your local students and younger kids. If I were to call you today and say, "Hey, I don't know anything about aviation, but I'm interested in getting my pilot's license," where do you start? What do you tell someone that calls you and asks you that on the phone?
So I usually I get a date to meet with that person in person. I work better when I'm sitting across from somebody, talk over the phone or talk over text or email. I like to be in the flesh across that person.
Man, that's got to freak a lot of people out nowadays.
Yeah,
I
this is from Gen Z.
Right. So I usually start with a time frame that they want to get this done. Do they want to be leisure about it? Do they want to get it done quick? Because what one of my jobs is to help them achieve their goals. If they just want to get their private for the fun of it, then I'm going to try to make it an enjoyable, not too time crunched experience. But if it's, a lot of my younger kids who started, they're looking to get it into aviation as a career. So it's kind of, let's grind this out, right? Let's get the requirements met. So I ask what their goal is, what the time frame is. So we apply for a student pilot application. What they're required to do on their own that I can't do as the instructor is they have to get a medical. So an aviation grade, aviation class medical, which basically it's an aviation specific doctor that checks them out, makes sure they're fit to fly. Um, there's also the written that I tell them about, saying, hey, by the time we take the check ride, you have to complete a knowledge test, a federal knowledge test by the FAA. So that's a requirement. And then we get some dates on the schedule to start with ground and flying. So I try to start as soon as I can with that person.
You mentioned the knowledge test and you mentioned the aviation physical. Those are resources that obviously you can't do those things for them, but you can guide them through, right?
Right.
There's a list that you can find. There's a database. They're called aviation medical examiners, and probably one of your local doctors is probably a certified AME. So you can find the database on the FAA's website, and then, as far as studying for the written test, there are a lot of resources out there and study guides. I mean, there's a whole industry based on taking these written tests because you need to take one for each certification that you want to add to your pilot ratings. But yeah, there's a few steps that you need to take before you get started, but we'll just jump right into it. And knowing what the end goal is, that's good to know as well.
And it's not as difficult as people think it is. I think that people outside of aviation, they have the common conception of, I want to fly, but it seems difficult to get into. But I will be honest, it is not the cheapest. I'm sure both of you can agree with me there, but it's not difficult to get into. Once you get rolling with an instructor that meshes well and you guys work together pretty good, it's pretty easy. It just all starts with that first flight.
Yeah. So you mentioned that how you kind of get started and what the conversation is, but okay, somebody's listening to this or someone who's looking around online. What's the first step? What do they need to do?
They just need to make a phone call. Is it as simple as that?
It's as simple as
Give
that.
Grant a phone call.
It's as simple as that. Yeah, you call the front desk and you can leave a message, and one of the instructors, whether it's myself or one of the other guys, will reach out and find a time that works where we can have a formal meet together. And from there is kind of what I had previously mentioned, get a plan together, get what the goal is in mind, the time frame. And so, yeah, it's as simple as a phone call or a message.
Nice.
People might be a little nervous about, like, I don't even know what to ask. So what are some of the common questions that you get that you could answer for listeners right now?
One of the common questions is they hear private pilot license, and so generally they think they can fly private jets. It's not true. They take private jets and they see the word private and they say, "Oh, a private pilot? I can get this and fly jets." That's not true. A private pilot license is very, very basic. It lets you fly single engine, propeller driven airplanes, usually around 2 to 4 seats. You can carry passengers. You can't get paid to fly, so you have to pay. You can't fly in clouds. So it's a very basic introductory rating. The private pilot license does not allow you to fly private jets, right? Or
Well, that's too bad.
yeah, right. That's what I thought, right?
So do people ask you, like, you kind of walked us through, like, you need the medical, there's a written test that people got to be thinking about, self-study ground school that they got to do. Does anybody ever ask you, like, how much flight time does it take, or like, what plane am I going to fly in?
A lot of people, they ask how long does it take, and they do ask what airplane I'd fly. And so the time frame, what I had mentioned before, it really takes as long as you want. Realistically, the average, I would say, is 3 to 5 months, 2 to 3 times a week, lessons 2 to 3 times a week. You're not grinding it out, but you're not taking forever. About the average. If you wanted to hustle and get it done, so 40 hours, 40 flight hours is the minimum to be eligible to take what we call the check ride, the final test. And within that 40 hours, you have all these different requirements. So a certain amount of night training, a certain amount of instrument training, a certain amount of cross-country training, flying from point A to point B. So if you really wanted to grind it out, get the requirements knocked out, take advantage of the weather, you'd probably be flying anywhere from 4 to 5 times a week, weather dependent. And you could get it done in a month and a half, but that's making it a pretty high priority,
Yeah.
And a lot of the people that I fly with, like the high school kids I fly with, school is their priority and they understand that. And of course they have jobs, so they fly about 1-2 times a week. So as far as airplanes goes, it's single engine, propeller driven. Common manufacturers are Cessna, Piper, standard 4-seat, fairly light airplanes that don't go fast, but it does the job. It teaches you how to fly, gets the basics down.
So if somebody called you up and said, "Hey, I think I'm pretty interested, but maybe I'm a little bit of a nervous flyer. I've never been in an airplane or a single engine airplane before." Do you offer like an intro flight for people like that? Just a quick intro, 30 minutes. These are the basics type thing.
We do. We do have intro flights available, and that's again with an instructor. And I should have started with that. So that's where it should start. Some people, they had an intro flight from another airport or another flight school, and they ended up moving, and they just remember that time they took the intro flight. But we do offer it. And as far as some people are scared of heights or get motion sick, or they get a little bump of turbulence and have a quick panic attack. As far as that goes, it's kind of the more you do it, the the more natural it becomes. Kind of like driving for the first time, or it's like doing that for the first time and getting better at it, getting more natural feeling.
I had a student when I was instructing full time that they had a fear of flying, and that's why they wanted to learn how to fly.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
and people are surprised to learn that the fear of flying is not so much the fear of heights or claustrophobia even, it's the fear of not being in control. So learning how it works and how to do it yourself and be the one at the controls can actually be a way to conquer that fear. And so
right,
I
yeah.
I found it interesting to be with that person as they went through their journey and overcame their fear of flying by learning how to fly.
That's a good way to put it. A lot of people, they have a fear, so they want to face it. So I haven't come across anyone like that though yet.
Well, it's good that you have an intro flight too, though, for those types of people. And I guess that
Right,
was probably kind of my main question is, academically, I'm interested in this, but I've never been in a plane. What's it like? I don't know if I'm going to hate it or am I going to be terrified or
right,
if I want
right.
to ride in this airplane with this guy for, 40 hours to get my private pilot license. So it's good to know. Yeah.
Grant, you went on a trip from Southern California to Alaska and then back to Southern California in what was it, a beach travel air, you said?
Yeah, Beechcraft Chevalier.
Can you just tell us about that? Because that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I'm friends with a guy named Miles out in California. We actually met at Oshkosh, and so we've known each other for about 2 years. Yeah, 2 years now, and so he owns what we call the world's greatest travel air. Right? It's a B95 travel air, so two engines. They completely redid the whole thing. Leather interior, full Garmin panel, air conditioning. I mean, it's the cross country traveler, right? And so I got my multi about a year and a half ago, and so we had known each other, and he invited me to build some multi time with him. So we've done these trips over the past, and Alaska being one of them. And so it was actually fairly recently we try to plan a trip, 1 to 2 trips each year, to help, because he understands where I'm at. And I've always heard, once you're settled in your career, try to help those below you, right? And so that's where he's at. He's an established corporate pilot, and so now that we're friends and he has this multi-engine airplane, he understands how valuable multi-engine time is, and he's willing to help me build it. And so we plan these trips, and I went out to California because he's out of Camarillo, and so we're planning to go up to Alaska. We planned to go to Juneau as our top end of the trip, and then make it back down. So starting out, we're about to go out on the trip, and the right starter has given us issues. The first 3 times, the Bendix arm is just spinning. It's not engaging. The engine's not starting. We get this terrible sound. And on the fourth try, I think, we get it started. So now we're in the predicament of, do we go or do we shut down, have maintenance take a look at it? So we made the decision, why would we leave an airport with maintenance that knows the airplane? So that delayed the trip a day and a half. So we're like, well, hopefully we make it to Alaska, right? Luckily, we were blessed and fortunate to have good weather along the whole trip. We ended up making it to Ketchikan with stops in Half Moon Bay which is NorCal, Northern California, just southwest of San Francisco. So we stopped in Half Moon Bay, stayed there a night. He has friends that have a ranch in Oregon. So we stopped in Oregon, an hour there hanging out. I did a little bit of cub flying. They trusted me to fly their cub, which was awesome.
Cool.
I never thought I'd fly a cub outside of Iowa. So here I am. And then we ended the second day up in Friday Harbor. So now we're making the decision, how far do we go, right? We're a day and a half behind schedule. I'm scheduled to be at work at this day, right, in the future. And so we're looking at the weather in Juneau.
You could have canceled on me, Grant. You could have canceled.
Yeah,
You didn't have to
yeah,
come back.
right. It was you.
Yeah, it was me.
Aaron's texted me, when are we going to fly? When are you back?
Yeah, come on,
And,
cut your Alaska trip short. I want to go fly in the Citabria. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I completely forgot about that.
I totally
Yeah,
would
so-
have understood if you canceled and postponed on me. That would have been fine.
Oh man, that takes me back. So we're in Friday Harbor, which is just northwest of Seattle. So we're in the northwest corner of the states.
You're in the islands.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's an island. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful place. And right across I don't know, is it the ocean or do they call it a channel? Right across the body of water is Canada, Victoria, British Columbia. Weather at the time of arrival for Juneau looks good, but the forecast of when we would depart is questionable. It's Alaska gets this marine layer almost that sticks around for could be several days. So if we made it up there, great. But what happens if we can't leave, right? So we looked further down south and we looked at Ketchikan, and Ketchikan is just southern Alaska, but it checks the box, right? It's Alaska.
Alaska, count it.
And so the forecast of arrival looks good and the forecast of departure looks good. So we weren't really cutting ourselves with a loss because, we're still going to make it to Alaska. That's still a check in the box. We took off the next day out of Friday Harbor and went up to Ketchikan, and we stayed the night there. And then the return trip on the way back with the stop in Victoria, which is right across from Friday Harbor. And so when we went up to Ketchikan, we went from United States to United States. Even though we passed over Canada, we didn't have to do customs or anything. But on the way back, we stopped in Canada where we did have to do customs. We stayed the night there, and then we cleared U.S. customs just over the channel in Friday Harbor. And then on the way back, we did... we tried to hit new airports, so we didn't want to do Half Moon Bay again because that's repetitive. So we stopped in Klamath Falls, Oregon, which is just south of Crater Lake. So we flew over Crater Lake. It's a national park, which was cool. Stayed the night there. And then the next morning, we stopped in Oceano, which is California. And it's right on it's an airport right on the beach. 3-minute walk to the beach. So we stopped there, had lunch, and then after lunch, we ended the day in Camarillo back to base.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I'm just kind of following along on the map here as you're talking about these places.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And so we've done other trips. So one time we did Camarillo all the way to the Bahamas, and then we ended in Texas because he had recurrent training for his airplane and I had work. So we did, that long cross country. We've done California to Iowa. I've got some good cross country experience in that airplane and in general. And think of him as a friend, but also a mentor.
Yeah.
He's pretty good where he's at, and his advice is very prevalent to where I'm at. So it was quite the experience.
Dude, I'm jealous. I'm twice your age, and those sound awesome, and I want to do them. I want to do those trips.
Yeah, so I agree. Alaska is my last state. I have not been. I've been to the other 49. Need to get to Alaska. So you've got a lot of cross country experience, and you've got Alaska checked in your logbook. So tell me, other than the starter not operating correctly on your first flight, what was the most memorable experience that stood out from that trip to Alaska?
Of course, mountain flying is gorgeous. So that was very memorable. I would say when we were flying, so we left we left Half Moon Bay, and we're flying up. We're doing the uh, I think they call it the Northwest VFR corridor, right? It's through San Francisco Bravo, and we're flying over Golden Gate. We're flying over Alcatraz, and there's like people swimming from Alcatraz, and I thought they were prisoners at first.
It's
And
probably some sort of race, huh?
right, yeah, that's what I thought. That was cool. I'd never been to Canada, and that was quite the experience. Victoria it feels like you wouldn't expect you're in Canada. It feels
Yeah.
very American,
Yeah.
but
It's
that was
beautiful there too. Yeah.
yeah, it's really beautiful there.
So you flew by some pretty big mountains on the way up there. I know Erin and I have flown into Seattle quite a bit. And
Yeah.
actually, on our Instagram page, I posted a video I took while flying with Erin, where there's a overcast layer of clouds. Mount St. Helens is poking through with snow,
Oh,
and then the sun is setting. So there's several other mountains that are along that range that are pretty substantial too. Did you see any of those on your way?
Rainier.
yeah, yeah. We did. I saw. I think on the way something similar to that. There's an overcast layer kind of by the mountain, and you could see the peak of it. And then, of course, up the western coast, Canada's got that mountain range that goes into Alaska. We did a mix of IFR and VFR in regards to filing, but we were generally around 9,000 feet. So not too high up.
In
Yeah.
through the valleys. Yeah.
Yeah.
You saw Shasta, I'm sure, when you were close to Klamath. And
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. We flew right next to that. That was
And you did this
Canadian,
whole trip in how many days?
either 4 or 5. It was less than a week. So it was constant. There wasn't too much downtime, which is good. Stay busy with flying and checking out cities and
A lot in a short amount of time.
did you have some good seafood when you were in the San Juan Strait?
of course I'd fished in Alaska, but when we were in I can't Half Moon, um I'd never had oysters and I'd never had like clams.
Nice.
The oysters.
The oysters are is that the one you suck out of the shell?
You can,
It's
yeah.
it's disgusting.
Jonathan and I differ on opinion on these.
The Pacific Coast oysters, Pacific
Gosh,
oysters suck. You got to go to the Atlantic or the Gulf. Those
terrible.
are far better and bigger. Well, we just started an Instagram page for the Flyover Frequencies podcast, and we'll post Grant's route from Southern California up to Alaska and back.
And do we have any pictures of the best travel air in the world, interior?
Yes,
Need to put some of those on there too. I would like to see the interior of that. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll post some of this stuff on the Instagram page if you're interested in checking it out.
Nice. Grant, you kind of talked a little bit about where you're at in your career, but what's next? What's on the horizon for you right now?
Honestly, I don't want to say I don't know, but really, I don't really know.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm always open to new opportunities. I'm open to meeting new people that might need somebody to fly for them. So I'm open to pretty much anything. I'm as open as I can be. But I'm I'm not really a planner. I'm take it as it comes. If an opportunity presents itself, I'll take it right then and there. But as far as planning, I'm just kind of keep doing what I'm doing until something changes. And
I can
then
identify with that.
some people hate me for it. They're like, I don't know how you get by. My girlfriend, she's the complete opposite. She's a planner. She has to plan. It seems like a year out in advance of what we're doing. And I'm just like, I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow.
I think that's an important perspective for people to realize too in aviation, is that there's not just one path. And we've talked about that on the show before, where there's not just one path to get to where you're going. And it's okay to enjoy the present and work on what you're doing and be focused and dedicated to what you're doing, and know that those opportunities are going to come when they come. Not that you don't need to be looking, and keep your eyes open, kind of like you said, and be open to networking and new relationships and exploring new pathways, but you don't have to have everything ironed out when you're 22 years old. So
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Well, cool. Unless you guys have anything else,
I'm good.
Yeah.
Grant, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your journey. From learning to fly in a Citabria with your dad, to flying across the country in a small twin, to earning your ratings and building the foundation for a career in corporate aviation. It's been inspiring to hear how hands on old school training shaped the pilot you are today, and the advice you shared for anyone looking to get started in aviation is practical, encouraging, and exactly what the next generation of pilots needs to hear. To our listeners, we hope Grant's story reminds you that no matter what your age or experience, the path into aviation is built one flight at a time, with curiosity, determination, and a little bit of adventure. Thanks for tuning into Flyover Frequencies. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and your hands on the yoke.
Thanks, Grant.
Thanks, guys.